All right, and welcome in here to the North Florida Prep Report. I'm Andrew Jupe giving you the lowdown here for you today. An exciting contest of what we have going on in the mix here of the Big Bend, North Florida, our area teams here. So, of course, we've had some confusion, some chaos, a lot of stuff happening around the sport, including Monday night games, including announcements from the state organization. The FHSA is dropping some knowledge, of course, of what they want to do going forward about how we're going to address all of these games. So within all that, there's a lot of muddy waters, but we want to get to you, break through the crap, and today, what we want to concentrate on, that are the playoff push. Of course, sometimes the best questions are answers. Jim Moore said it best. Playoffs? Absolutely. Let's get into it here on today's episode. Okay, so we're going to start out in Rural Ball, which has a little bit of a change from what you would have anticipated or what we saw last week. Because of the FHSA announcement, of course, the field has changed. We were going to go into a two-bracket situation that would last 5 weeks. Of course, the A bracket was going to be the official state champion, which would have 20 teams. Teams 13 to 20 would have played a play-in game, but now that field has been condensed down to 16. So you lose the playoff games. Only your top 16 teams are going to be fighting for a state championship in the Rural Ball. The next 16 are going to compete in the B bracket, and then, of course, the final two, if they wish, will be going forward and competing in kind of a bowl game or an end-of-the-season game if they elect to do so. So the A bracket and the B bracket championships will be played at the Villages, which, of course, is another thing. Now we know where all 8 of our state championships will be played, but this is the only one that will not take place in South Florida. So, going forward for what you have here today, let's get into the rural picture. So, the top of it here, let's get into some points. As you can see, here's the spread going for the rural classification. So this is just the top half, the teams that would be in the pseudo A bracket, so to speak. So, of course, you see some of your heavy hitters, Union County, Hawthorne in the mix, of course. But let's take a focus on our area teams. Here, of course, we're based out of the North Florida coverage region, which is from Walton out west to Suwannee County. Those are the 39 football schools, 3940 football schools that we cover. So, for this focus, if you are a Madison County fan, things are looking good here for Madison. As you can see, sitting atop the standings in the top 3. If the playoffs started today, they would be playing Franklin County. Of course, Madison County would host that game here in the first round. If you're another fan in the area, if you're an Osceola Christian fan, so you got a little bump up with the big victory over Lighthouse this week. You're now up to 8th. If playoffs were to start today, you would be hosting here the Pahokee Blue Devils, which is a very, very tall task here to host Pahokee. Of course, coming over at 4-2, but Osceola looking pretty, and they're continuing to climb. As long as they stay undefeated, the metrics are liking them. Moving down the list here, if you're a Chipley fan in our coverage area, once again, things are looking good. You will be hosting. That is right. Chipley coming in here as the 7 seed in the rural classification. If the playoffs started today, you would be hosting Fort White, which is a tough task out of that north central Florida area. But Chipley looking good here at 6-1 so far for the Tiger faithful. Moving on down, some of our other squads. Jefferson County, if you're a Tiger fan, currently would be in if the playoffs started today. Of course, they would be on the road as the 12th seed, would be headed to Chiefland, of course, which we just saw one of our other teams here in the area play Chiefland, which is Taylor County, so a tough contest down there. Both teams at 6-1, but Jeffco not really getting much love here for the metrics, coming in at 12th with that 6-1 number. Of course, if they continue to win, they will continue to rise, and they will definitely have opportunities to do so. But if the playoffs started today, Jeffco on the road. Slide down to some more of our area teams. If you're a Blountstown fan, you are currently in, but barely. So Blountstown been bouncing back after a little bit of an up and down start, a really tough schedule for them. they've come on strong here. 4-2 now is Blountstown, so the Tigers would be headed on the road. If playoffs started today, they would be playing at Hawthorne. Of course, I believe, 2 to 3 time reigning champs here in the rural classification, or the lowest classification here, depending on what your metric is or whatever the state decides to call our classifications these days. But Hawthorne has been rolling. That's where Blountstown would be hitting the road for them there. So let's skip on down to the second half of things, the would-be B bracket. So, of course, we got to give some love to our teams who would have been in the A bracket had the rules not changed with the announcement that they're only taking 16 in the rural classification. So those teams who want to give some love here too is Lafayette and Hamilton County. So those would have been teams 17 and 19 if the field was still at 20, and they would be playing in those play-in rounds. But like we said, the line has been cut to 16, and so now these are your B bracket pools. Having said that, Lafayette will be the 1 seed here for the situation. So if you're a Hornet fan, you got the big jump up with the big victory versus Branford here recently. If the playoffs started today, you would be hosting Liberty County. So if you're on Team Trojan, if the playoffs started today, you are in the B bracket, and you would be hosting, of course, Trenton. So be Hamilton, Trenton, that matchup here. Let's take a look at some of our other area squads as we go down the list here. Port St. Joe, if playoffs started today, for the Tiger Shark faithful, you'd be sitting at the 9 seed, so you'd be headed on the road over to Dixie County to face the Bears. Moving on, another one of our teams, Sneads, also on the road. If you're a Pirate faithful, they would be playing Fort Meade if the playoffs started today. Trickling down, one more team here in the B bracket we will see is Weewahitchka, who picked up a win a couple weeks ago, so they got above the line of the pseudo bowl game, so they got themselves into a bracket. They've been playing really solid as of late. If the playoffs started today, they would be traveling to the 2 seed in the B bracket over to Marathon. So that puts a bow on what you have here for your rural classifications. So let's moving on in here to 1A, let's bring up the picture. Very, very interesting. Of course, we're only going to focus on Region 1 because that's where our teams are. So you bring up the bracket here. As you can see, you see Providence, the top dog. They're taking care of business here. And, of course, the line to beat is the 8 line. So if the playoffs started today, unfortunately, a couple of our schools, NFC, FAMU DRS, would be on the outside looking in. But the numbers are still tight here, so though not a good probability, you still have a chance. Kind of NFC, which is about 5 points back of that line to gain here to jump up into that 8 seed, but it's going to be tough. You can see the one indication there. This is interesting because one of our teams, St. John Paul II, has locked up the automatic bid. So that is one team, the only team in this region that has secured their spot in the playoffs. But, of course, they've ditched the old model, has the FHSA, that if you win your district, you automatically get a top 4 seed. So you still have to earn it. So St. John Paul II, high probability to host. So if the playoffs started today, as we fast forward over into the bracket, they would be playing PK Yonge. So PK Yonge currently leads their division, but, of course, has not locked it up. Of course, they're in a winner-take-all scenario with Trinity Catholic, so whoever wins that game, So PK Yonge isn't leading, but they're tied for the lead at 0-0 in the district. Winner-take-all between them and Trinity Catholic, which is another wild situation because Trinity Catholic is potentially one of those bid-stealing teams. So like you said, you win the district, you get in the playoffs. So if Trinity Catholic were able to steal this district, currently only 1-6 compared to the 5-2 PK Yonge, you think and you project forward that PK Yonge gets in. So think of it like March Madness. Basically, Trinity Catholic is a bubble team, but if they were able to win their conference, aka district, they would get the automatic bid, which if that happened, that would bump, as it stands today, Impact Christian Academy would be knocked out. So, of course, that's the beauty of winning your district. Sometimes it gets you, sometimes it doesn't. So, some of our other area teams in the mix. If you're a Maclay fan, things are looking hot. So, you've dropped one spot. Last week, you were coming in, I believe, in the 2 seed was Maclay there. So, they've fallen to the 3 after St. John Paul II. But you still have to look good and feel good about where you are the Maclay Marauders. So, they're in a great position is if this 3 seed, if they can hold that 2 or 3 line, even though they are unable to win their district, you would probably potentially get matched up with Episcopal or University, who it looks like will not win their division. So even though Maclay did not win their district, still a high probability that they come away, if they stay in this top 3, top 4 situation, that they come away with a home game here in the first round of the playoffs. Some of our other area teams, if the playoffs here started today, Maclay, St. John Paul II in, like we've talked about, and of course, NFC and FAMU DRS, unfortunately, on the outside looking in. So that's our Class 1A picture. Let's turn the page and get into 2A. All right, Class 2A coming at you here. As you can see the spread, let's get to the points. The top one that sticks out, Gadsden County, rolling. Some of our other area teams, if the playoffs started today, they are in. Taylor County, in. Florida High, in. So, rolling on down, Mariana, in. Walton, in. On the outside looking in is going to be Freeport, South Walton, Rutherford in our coverage area, as well as North Bay Haven. So, of course, not a end-all be-all at this point, but things are starting to fall into place here. You have a couple bubble teams which I think still have a shot at it, especially when you talk about their districts and the spread there. So, first of all, automatic bids. Bowles and Mariana have locked up the districts, so they're in. So if you're a Bulldog faithful, you're good to go. For Mariana, you've locked it up. So shout out to Mariana, one of our boys in our coverage area. If the playoffs started today, Mariana, you would be playing Taylor County, which would be a very fun battle with the Bulldogs here today. So an interesting thing about this is kind of a wild card. Potentially Gadsden, Taylor County, and Florida High. All of our teams here in North Florida could have a 3-way tie, which could send into a wild tiebreaker scenario, So that could be very interesting going forward. But it looks like, and you kind of project forward, look at the gap in these numbers. They're all double-digit ratings, and then the fall-off between the 7th and 8th team, Walton and Baldwin, is significant. They're about 7 to 12 points back. So I feel like you're really good feeling about these teams who've got 7-8 games in the bag at this standpoint. So regardless of how the rest of the way finishes, Florida High, Taylor County, Gadsden, I think all 3 of these teams are in. Going forward with that, Bowles has already clinched up their division, but a wild card in the mix, and you talk about teams being at risk, South Walton is that wild card. If the playoffs started today, they'd be out, but they still have a chance to win their district and get in as the 10 seed. They would be bumped up to 8, and they would knock Baldwin out of the playoffs. So, really interesting spread to see here today. Also coming on strong, Rutherford, South Walton, even Bozeman, not that far back of Baldwin. So a lot of our area teams, especially those ones out to the west, an opportunity still to chase down Baldwin and slide into the playoffs. So everybody kind of 7 down is really still, really anybody from 7 to 13 based on the metrics is still in play here. But of course, many things to be determined, as of course 2 districts still on the table here, of course District 1 and District 3. So shabam, that's your picture here. The star of the show here in Region 1 are the Rains Vikings. Far and away the best squad going here, and keep it rolling for the Vikings. 6-0 perfect record, so we'll see how they finish. They still have not locked up their district. They are the favorite to, but potentially a bid steal in the mix. They would be going up against Yulee, and if Yulee is able to upset Rains, they would be the upset special, and that would be a bid steal, which would put Parker on the outside looking in. So let's focus on some of our area teams up north. Shout out to the Godby Cougars, sitting at 2nd right now. Of course, looking fantastic at 5-2. They've locked up the district. They're good to go. Godby is in. So if it started today, they would be playing Bay, another one of our area teams who's also locked up the district. So this is where that rule change kind of comes into the play that we talked about a couple classifications ago, is if you have two district champions going in, the host is going to go to the tiebreaker. So even though Bay has secured their district championship, they are not guaranteed a home game, and if the playoffs started today, they would be in, but they would not be hosting. So let's go down some of our other area teams. Wakulla, of course, unable to win their district with the automatic bid, but still looking good there at the 5 seed. If playoffs started today, they would be traveling to Bishop Kenny, who's the favorite to win that division out there in Jacksonville. So I believe as I look at the metrics here, with that squad out to the east, Bishop Kenny currently 1-1, but also potential to go into a 3-way tiebreaker here with that situation. Bishop Kenny, Menendez, and Parker could all have an automatic bid claim. There's a wild 3-way tie that could happen if Bishop Kenny beats West Side here coming up in the next couple weeks. So definitely something to keep an eye on. Some of our other area teams in the mix. Suwannee, if the playoffs started today, if you're a Bulldog faithful, currently on the outside looking in down there in that 11 spot, of course, going down, and they're still in the mix though, so they can pick up a couple victories, make a little stand here. They can still slide back in. Suwannee is utilizing that extra bye week game against Wakulla, and that could be interesting if Wakulla has basically locked up a spot. Suwannee's trying to jump in. Maybe Wakulla's resting some players. You could see some movement there, which would be an upset, but would help the cause potentially Suwannee to jump over maybe the Yulees, the Pensacola's of the world, maybe even Parker to get into this playoff picture. So, all things to keep an eye on here. Let's couple teams here in the 4A classification that we focus on, and of course that's Rickards and Arnold, the only ones here in our coverage area. So, as we take a look at the picture here, playoffs started today. Rickards and Arnold would both be in, but they're in a little bit of a dangerous situation here in that 6-7 seed. So, Choctaw has locked up the district, so that's official with the win over Rickards here over last weekend. But Rickards, Arnold, at large, still looking pretty good. The dangerous one in this region is Ed White. They could potentially bid steal if they're able to upset and take down their district foe. So something to keep an eye on here is Ed White. Of course, they're with Riverside and Inglewood. So Riverside, of course, the favorite here so far from the points. But if Ed White's able to get them, dangerous living. Same thing over for Escambia. Escambia, Pine Forest kind of competing for the district. They're in a winner-take-all scenario, so that could affect the standings as well, but also something to keep an eye on. Here, troublesome potentially for Rickards and Arnold, but based on the spread, Columbia is 4 points and change back here from Arnold, and even more so, almost 6 points behind Rickards. You got to think that things would be looking solid for them. But if you're the Rickards faithful, like we said, playoffs started today, you are in. Rickards will be on the road, probably looking to play Escambia, which is trending towards the district champion there. Arnold, if you're on Team Marlins, as it would start today, you would have a rematch with your district opponent Choctaw. You would be heading out there to Fort Walton Beach to take on the Big Green Machine. So that's our 4A picture. Let's go on, last but not least, we'll get into the big dogs in 5. All right, here's a look at our 5A classification. Of course, teams to note in our area is Mosley, Lincoln, Childs, Leon. Kind of our big 4 going forward here in the picture. Lincoln, shout out to our boys. They have locked up the automatic bid, so Trojans are in regardless. If the playoffs started today for the Lincoln Trojan faithful, you would be hosting Fleming Island. Here, of course, with their 4-3 record, it would be really tough for them to get in a situation where they did not have a home game here in round 1. Of course, our other area team has not locked up the district, but looking good is Mosley. If playoffs started today, they would play the 8th seed Mainland and hosting them. Of course, you kind of look at the ebbs and the flows of this district. Lincoln, I think, would really like to get up to the 2 seed, because if they could get up to the 2 seed, then potentially with Niceville getting knocked down to 3 or 4, you would see Lincoln on the other side of the bracket here for Niceville. Those 2 teams are playing here shortly, so that'll go a long way. If Lincoln's able to take down Niceville, you really don't want to get into a rematch, right? But that would have them jump up to the 2 seed. Niceville could fall to the 4, get them on the other side of the bracket, make them deal with Mosley, and hopefully see it in the regional final. But if playoffs started today, Lincoln is in. Other two teams of concern if you're a Charles Timberwolves fan currently on the outside looking in, but a bubble team going here for you today. An opportunity to kind of sneak in and take care of some business there. They're sitting at the 9, a little bit far back of Mainland, so they're going to have to do some serious work, but the book has not been written on Charles. As far as Leon, really tough. Probably not going to get in here if you're a Leon Lions fan. Playoffs started today. You're on the outside looking in. Of course, Lincoln has locked up the district, so no automatic bid on the table, but still an opportunity to play spoiler, and you got a chance to take down your rivals, Charles, here down the stretch of this season. So, putting a wrap on it, you still got to be rooting for the big red machine. Big picture, that's what we have here with the playoffs. Of course, these are subject to change every single week. If you want to see the full metric, the full slate of all the teams that we have here in the state of Florida, you go to the state website. The FHSA has that, but we're going to put that in the description below. They'll have the full slate, and that comes out every Tuesday. Typically, that comes out every afternoon around lunchtime, so noon-ish is when it's supposed to come out, but usually by 2 or 3, by the time school's letting out, that will be published and official. So you can track your team, keep up with them as they go forward, but that's what we have here for you today. So thank you for joining us in the North Florida Prep Report. Andrew Jupe giving you the update here, the spill of the playoff push.